With that, Mr. Cole, you're recognized.
Thank you. I thought Simpson was going to get a third round somehow there.
Why I'm not next.
It's supposed to be the ex-chairman's prerogative. First, I want to begin by number one, just thanking you and thanking your department. And you guys have been absolutely terrific to work with on Native American issues. Frankly, you've been terrific across the board, in my view, but particularly in that area. And as you know, this committee on a bipartisan basis has prioritized that, even in very difficult budget times. And the last 4 years, we actually have done more than the president asked us to do. I'm glad you upped the ante this time, particularly in the area of education. But as our chairman said, that's going to be particularly difficult because your numbers are based on, taxes and fee increases and mandatory spending changes that are unlikely to happen, in my view, and that frankly are beyond our purview as a committee regardless, as much as we would hope that we can find some common ground with the administration there. Given that, let's assume we have a flat budget again, which is, I think, the default position here really is the BCA. It's until we get serious negotiations at a level above, anybody in this room at the congressional leadership to president level, I don't think that's going to change. So assuming that, what are your areas of priority, and where would you like us to put emphasis? Because we're going to have to make some tough choices again, I suspect.
You may not like my answer.
Well, you told me that yesterday.
I did, but I didn't want to repeat
You said
that.
if I asked you this question, I'd get an answer I didn't like.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that this budget moves beyond sequestration, which is exactly what we believe we should do. My first year in this job was 2013. It was a miserable start in this job where we had across-the-board cuts. It didn't matter how important the work was. The staff was demoralized. We were cutting things that should never be cut, like grant support costs for schools in Indian country because of sequestration. So I hope upon hope that you and your colleagues will move us beyond sequestration, because there's just, as a business person, it's a crazy way to run a country. And so this budget assumes we move beyond that. This budget does lay out our priorities. As you heard in my response to Congresswoman Lowy, it doesn't have all the things in there that we might like. It wasn't actually easy on any of the bureaus to come up with these numbers, and we asked them to prioritize, and that's what we reflect here. So strong priorities around upholding our trust and treaty obligations to Native Americans, particularly education, where we have been spending money and not doing a job for these kids for many years, and we just have to change that up. So that's in here. I can't postpone the National Park Centennial. It is happening in 2016, whether I like it or not. I have heard from many members of Congress about, we wish you were permitting our oil and gas wells faster. We wish you were moving forward quicker on our coal leasing permits. These are all things that take resources. And one of the reasons that we are not as fast as we aspire to be is because our budgets have been squeezed and we're operating with fewer people in some of these areas than we were before. And no one's reduced the complexity for us in terms of what we're required to do. We are trying to reduce the complexity to the extent that we can. Mike, as is our representative on the regulatory look back. What is it in our regulations that we have control over that we can make smarter so that it does cost us less time? And there are proposals out there, like, for example, tribal recognition, which is a very long and laborious process for us and very expensive for tribes. And so we're looking at making sure that it's rigorous and difficult, but not inconsistent and takes forever and millions of dollars. And we think that there are things that we can do about that. So we know that there's a lot in this budget that means a lot to people, particularly, I would say, across the West. PILT, we believe, should be funded on a mandatory basis. I also, as you know, believe that Land and Water Conservation Fund should be fully funded, as was intended when it was passed 50 years ago. I think there's things we can work on together to address some of those things on the mandatory side. PILT combined with secure rural schools and LWCF is a good way to do that. But I can't say to you that we should prioritize tribes over the National Park Centennial, or that we should hammer away any more at the BLM budget than it already is when people want permits to drill for oil and gas on their lands. this is a budget that's not lavish. It's a budget that gets us back to doing what I think the American people expect us to do as steward of 20% of the nation's lands and of as one of the primary points of contact and advocacy for Native Americans. And frankly, in here are things that I know people care about: droughts, floods, stream gauges, Landsat images, U.S. Geological Survey, induced seismicity, and why is that happening in Oklahoma, all of those things. So that's what's in here. And at this point, our budget reflects our priorities.
I think that's a fair answer, and I don't disagree, and I don't take offense. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I asked the question was so you could make exactly the point that you made. But sequester isn't a choice. It's the law. And it was a law that was not only signed by the president. I always refer people, go read Bob Woodward's wonderful book, The Price of Politics. Sequester was suggested by the president as a mechanism. So if we're going to get rid of that mechanism, something I agree with you on, quite frankly, because I think far too much of the spending reduction has come out of the discretionary budget. We all know the numbers. I think Chairman Rogers quoted them in an earlier hearing today, $165 billion less in discretionary spending than we saw in the last year of the Bush administration. And a lot of us here sit on defense, and we know what the consequences are there, and we're extremely concerned. But again, this was a mechanism proposed by the president. And so far, the proposal, I will just tell you, from a political reality, we can debate the merits of it, isn't going to happen. As envisioned by the president. And there needs to be an engagement at some level. And I would say our side needs to be engaged too. I don't want to put this off entirely on the administration, but it's going to require presidential leadership to do that, or we will be back at BCA levels. I just state that for the record. It's not where I want to be, but I think that's exactly where we're headed. Unless we get some engagement. Maybe we can get a Ryan Murray type deal again after the deal. But my guess is through the appropriations process, we will appropriate at the BCA levels, because I don't see a deal coming before then. So again, I'm not going to ask you it's like asking a parent to choose between their children. I recognize that you put a lot of work and effort into this, and I broadly agree with your priorities, to tell you the truth. Although I will say for the record, if it comes down between celebrations and national parks and Indians, I know which side I'm going to be on, because people trump celebrations, quite frankly, and they need health care. Trumps these things. Education trumps these things. And we have a unique obligation here, trust responsibility, a treaty responsibility, and a part of the population has probably been more neglected than any others. And I know there's been plenty of tough stories in American history, but this one is particularly sad, and it's a particular and peculiar federal responsibility and the focus of this committee. So I just want to end with it. I'm taking more time than I should. I just want to again thank you. I want you to continue to make the point that you make, that we are putting you and others in almost impossible situations as managers of our resources and as being in charge of these departments. But I think we're doing that, by the way, to Secretary Carter and Secretary Burwell, and I can go through the list. They're all having to make choices they should not have to make. But unless the president is willing to put something on the table that politically is realistic at some level, I don't care if it doesn't have to be done publicly, then this will happen. This is where we are going, because it is the law. It's not a choice of Congress. It's the law that it has to follow, that, again, the president recommended, the president signed. So I'm anxious that we sit down. I think we can sit down at some point and get there. But, again, I don't think from an administration standpoint, you can simply propose a lot of things that are based on assumptions that politically aren't going to happen. And we can't operate that way here. I wish we could. I wish we could take your top line and work with you on that, and I suspect we'd come out pretty close to the same place. But I doubt we're going to get a 302B allocation that reflects the number you and I would like to see, absent a deal well above our pay grade. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.